Welcome, everyone, to our four-part series. This is the third part in Marketing Gone Wrong, Are You Guilty? My name is Bob Jameson, VP of the East at Ad Taxi. Once again, we have Megan here. Megan, please introduce yourself.
Hello, Megan Bacor, Director of Client Services for the West.
And Chris.
Hey, everybody. Chris Berkey, Director of Client Services for the East.
Welcome back, guys. So, obviously, just want to remind everyone, just in case you were feeling a little unperfect today, that no one is perfect. And here are some common mistakes to avoid in order to win that journey towards perfection. So we've already gone through parts 1 and 2. Today, we're going to be talking about blindly accepting auto optimizations on Google. A rather polarizing topic that gets these two fired up for sure. So really glad that we'll be talking about this. So obviously, it's always good to start off with a little humor, and this visual speaks for itself, right? It's Google finding some more keywords that could possibly be tied to your business, and that's gonna be the theme of what we're talking about, right? Because I don't know that necessarily it's malicious, right? But every business size and characteristics and brand equity varies, and I think that Google's trying to make things more automated, and with that, we're finding that not every business gets affected equally based on those things. So let's talk about match type, guys. If Chris, if you wouldn't mind weighing in on kind of what's happening in terms of changes.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, Google used to be such a matter-of-fact place, right? You knew if you implemented an exact match keyword for hospital, a particular hospital, you did that search, that hospital came up, and you really probably didn't see very many other ads, right? You saw exactly what you were looking for. You get down to phrase match, opens it up a little bit, but it was pretty clearly defined when you performed a search what you were going to get, and that data would show you that when us as marketers would look at it. Fast forward to today, and Megan, I know you feel this too. That is not what the data looks like when you get in there. If you have, local hospital, the hospital's name there as a search, it could be an exact match, but in that data, you see searches for every other hospital that's in the area. Or if you had a phrase match, it could go all the way down to an X-ray tech or, local physician. So it's really kind of opened it up to where we're kind of playing defense a little bit more than we had to with something that used to be very matter of fact.
Gotcha. Any additional thoughts on that, Megan?
I mean, I think you nailed it, Berkey, in the sense of these terms are getting a little bit looser. They're not quite as exact as they used to be. Now there's variables of exact close variant, and then your phrase match variants, and then broad just keeps getting broader. The broad terms as we see it today are very different than what we saw 2 or 3 years ago even. And there's also some elements that Google is influencing the addition of broad match keywords substantially more so. And there are settings that you have to check or not check to ensure that those are not always in the mix. Now, it's not always a bad thing though either. I think something to add to that is these will actually help you in the long run of identifying new areas or new search themes or new ways that your consumers are searching. So you just have to be ready, I think, in order to just monitor those structures and adjust accordingly based off of that.
Really good point. So, I mean, when we think about match types of the past, obviously, it was broad, it was phrase, it was exact. And I think that, under the broad match example, it was something along the lines of a keyword like lawn mowing service. But it would actually, the actual search may have been lawn care companies. I think we could all agree that it's a logical correlation, right? Everyone might search differently, use different words, and it might be a regional thing where you're from, what you call things. Obviously, some people call it soda, some people call it pop. So, that logic applies here as well. And then when you look at phrase match, it was, something gets added to the keyword like lawn mowing service. So best lawn mowing service in Philadelphia. It makes complete sense. And then lastly, exact match, lawn mowing service, 1 for 1. for lawn mowing service. And these days, frankly, I don't see often where these completely line up with a search, but it's going to be more like this, where broad match might find something that might attach you to a search term that is kind of related, but not every lawn service in this example here does lawn aeration. That's a more advanced service that doesn't necessarily always apply to lawn. So that's Google saying, okay, this is part of lawn care, but that's not them being expert in the lawn mowing industry and to understand that might not be a service that every lawn care service provides. And then phrase match would allow you to have lawn mowing service near me, landscaping service to cut grass, hire company mow lawn. But there could be examples that let something bleed into this that just wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for the specific business. And then obviously exact match, they've changed it to where it might be the same meaning, right? So grass cutting and lawn mowing are the same thing. Well, that's great. Like in this case, makes complete sense. But we've seen examples where the grouping them together wouldn't necessarily be logical as it pertains to that business specifically. It just kind of depends. So understanding the business and what keywords are appropriate for them and making adjustments is really important. This one is interesting to me. This is a personal injury lawyer. And the keyword that we were essentially trying to show up under was auto injury lawyer, right? You see that depicted here in the keyword column. The search term, meaning what was actually searched on Google to the left here, was essentially the name for attorneys. These are attorneys that happen to exist in a different state than the client at hand. So essentially here, Google, because they know that these search terms on the left are attorneys, decided because this particular client was in the auto injury keyword category that they would attach them to that. So essentially at that point, we're talking about attorneys that are in a different state. So, normally, Chris, the tactic here is to bring about negative search terms to help combat that and play whack-a-mole. Does this mean we have to do that for every attorney that's out there with every name possible across the baby book spectrum?
This one's definitely an interesting one, right? Because to Megan's point earlier, the broad match piece, and we're not even in broad match here, we're in phrase, but some of these keyword sets could work for a client in a certain vertical. I think for lawyers it doesn't, right? Because to your point, this lawyer doesn't work in the practice. They don't even practice in the state. So, for lawyers where it becomes difficult, because Google is picking up every single name, you're not going to know, every single lawyer in the entire country, right? Because this is even picking up someone that's outside of the geography that you've defined. So you kind of have to be strategic with what you're doing and put in, top 1,000 last names and first names and try it that way to try and limit the damage. And then you go in and as you find onesie twosies of lawyers that don't work in that practice, you can kind of add them in. You may want to change that strategy of phrase match to where you move auto injury lawyer to an exact match. You still may encounter those names popping in, but maybe it happens less and you have to do, less research. But I think, negative keywords as they were important before have become even more so now in this environment if you want to really do right by your client. Because while it's great, you can show a lot of searches and that volume is wonderful. If it doesn't make sense to the end goal of your client, it's really just a lot of waste and it's hurting them in the long run.
Megan, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to bring it up.
Depending on your industry too, you can end up going through a lot of that waste quickly. I mean, just in this example that you're showing on the screen, it's $114 cost per click. That's just off of one click. I see this a lot on like car loan, for example, as well. It might be somebody that's looking for a personal loan and that's not the same industry. That's not, but if you have it set to a broad match or even a phrase match, it's going to pick up on those. And so you're going to have to be very, very diligent to ensure that you're staying in front of the car loan people, but maybe the auto loan people, or the, I can't think of another one, but just all of the very, very close variations of it that still pertain to the same industry. So just keeping your cost in mind, your industry in mind, and then also just thinking of every other variation of that term that might be relevant, but then also might not.
Makes a lot of sense. And that term, close variant, I mean, it could mean a lot of things, but obviously, and the I would say the novice eye may look and go, oh, these are competitors. And well, obviously, we would want competitors within a competitor campaign, not necessarily in a service campaign for probably one of their most important keywords. But at the same time, I don't know that you would consider them competitors if they're practicing law in a different state. So definitely an interesting piece here. I would love for you guys to help me walk through this, because you guys have been the best in navigating this. It's been something that obviously for a lot of businesses like Coke or Pepsi, you don't need to add soft drink at the end of a search. We know what they are. So Google for them might work rather easily, but for Marty's HVAC, you search Marty's by itself, we don't realize we're talking about Marty's HVAC that happens to be located in suburban Ohio. So when you establish a campaign around that business, the competitor campaigns, the branded campaigns, and even the service campaigns can somehow often bleed together. You guys mind touching on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think, we've been kind of discussing, does the strategy fit your brand, right? I think that's what it all comes down to when we talk about this. That HVAC scenario, if your name is in there and Robert's HVAC is a search, well, are you going to win that direct search? Probably not. But when you get into an e-commerce situation where someone's looking for a certain sneaker and you're sneaker brand X, and maybe somebody does a search for sneaker brand Y, or not even, like, you have an opportunity to win that too. So it's trying to ride that fine line of, does that broadness make sense to help the end user get to that purchase or get to that action, or is it hindering my client and are we wasting money? It's definitely a delicate balance. And I know, Megan, you deal with this a lot.
Unfortunately, yes. So you really have to stay diligent and agile in just ensuring that that's the direction that you want your campaigns to go.
That makes sense. So, staying informed, like you talked about, like monitoring changes in the industry, but also I think knowing your client's business to really understand and make those judgment calls when a search term along with a keyword is appropriate for that business. And then making those adjustments. And Megan, you've brought up examples where you're changing things back and forth between optimizing to clicks versus conversions and things like that, just to try to generate better performance, right?
I think just going back to the whole point of the whole comment of this section is really to focus on, don't just be blindly observant to those particulars of the platform. Be ready to push the limits a little bit. And we've done just that, where if we're maximizing conversions one month, but then we see conversions drop off, we hit below that threshold, we might switch it over back to a max click strategy. So you just have to be ready to be nimble across the strategies and the bidding tactics that you deploy. And like that middle one says, don't be afraid to change those preset variables, because you might actually see stronger performance in the long run with that.
No, it makes sense. And then the last one, and Megan already touched on it, but be agile and just continue to update those tactics to improve performance. That's it for part 3 of our series. Thank you everyone for your time, and be sure to tune in for part 4.